Dear viewers, welcome to this episode of Expert Speaks. These days, multi-asset fund in the mutual funds are making a lot of noise. Every company is ready to launch a mutual fund or promoting their multi-asset fund. What exactly is happening in this space? What are multi-asset fund? Is it for you? What are the factors that you have to keep it in mind? Is there a chance for you to make a lots of money by investing in multi-asset fund? I'm going to ask all these questions to the expert of the week, fund manager, Mr. Ashutosh Bhargava from Nippon India Mutual Fund. Stay till the end of this video. Very engaging conversation. This is NRI Money Clinic for you, and I am Dr. Chandrakant Bhatt, your financial guide for a happy living.
NRI Money Clinic. No hype, just the right advice.
Dear viewers, fund manager Mr. Ashutosh Bhargava has been very kind to accept our invitation and talk to you through this forum to give you the knowledge pertaining to the multi-asset fund. To give you a brief introduction of Mr. Ashutosh Bhargava, he is the head of research and fund manager at Nippon India Life AMC, popularly known as Nippon Mutual Fund. He has over 26 years of work experience, of which he has spent 17 years in equity research. He is a specialist in rule-based investment. Prior to that, he worked in Nippon for a period of 16 years. Prior to that, he has worked with JP Morgan as an analyst. Welcome to this episode, Mr. Ashutosh Bhargava.
Thanks a lot for having me on your show. Looking forward for a very engaging discussion with you.
Ashutosh, recently the markets have drawn a great amount of attention towards these multi-asset funds. I have been in this market for quite some time. Of course, I have used these funds in our customers' portfolios, but it wasn't that popular. For the benefit of my audience, can you please explain what are the multi-asset funds?
So, multi-asset funds are vehicles which can help investors achieve their asset allocation and diversification goal. So, time and again, we have seen the leadership in the market changes. So, sometimes one asset class does better than the other, and this cycle keeps on repeating. With multi-asset funds, investors can look to achieve their financial long-term goals, but can also improve their overall journey towards that destination. Because in multi-asset funds, the overall drawdown or the volatility of your portfolio returns is generally much lesser than equities and such asset classes where return potentials is high, but at the same time, they are also prone to large drawdowns and higher volatility. So if investors are looking for better risk adjusted returns or returns per unit of stress taken, then in that context, multi-asset funds are relatively good option. And that's why in the last few years, this has caught up industries and investors' fancy.
As I understand, the purpose of multi-asset fund is to keep the investor on the center line on the road without exposing them too much to the drawdown in case markets correct without giving notice, which is the usual case. So it saves a lot of trouble for the investors. My question to you is, how does the multi-asset funds are designed? What goes into making of a multi-asset fund? What are the assets which are used to create a multi-asset fund?
In a typical multi-asset fund, as the name itself suggests, there are multiple asset class exposure that an investor is exposed to. These asset classes include equity, fixed income, commodities, and within each of these asset classes, there can be more variation. The idea is to combine 3 or 4 different asset classes which have different journeys. They have lesser correlation in terms of providing returns versus each other. And in that process, to reduce the drawdown and improve the overall investor experience. So the way they are constructed, it all depends on the offering, whether it is more tilted towards one asset class over the other, or it is well balanced and distributed among all 3 to 4 asset class that are there in the overall mix.
See, in the marketplace, there are so many multi-asset funds. Every AMC has brought in a multi-asset fund. Some people had multi-asset from ages together. Some people started in the last 2, 3 years. Are all these multi-asset funds, they are same, or there is a variance? It's a broad terminology is multi-asset. Under that, there is a variation. About what is the answer that you have for the audience?
So there is a lot of variation of the multi-asset funds which are available in the market. The basic difference starts with the whether investor is looking for more complexity or more simple offering. When I say complexity, some of the multi-asset funds are driven by set of guiding principle or a model which help determine whether at a particular point of time you should be overweight or underweight on a particular asset class. Then there are multi-asset funds which generally don't deviate much from their pre-stated asset allocation. They are simple to understand, simple to communicate, and even simple to manage as compared to the more complex asset allocation or rather model-based asset allocation offerings. Other difference is that whether it is tilted to one particular asset class or it is widely diversified into three or four asset classes. For example, is it equity oriented multi-asset fund wherein equity contributes 65-70% and rest of the other asset classes have close to 30% kind of allocation distributed. So is it just for the namesake multi-asset or is it true to the label wherein each of the asset classes has is reasonable exposure which actually provides rightful diversification which a typical asset allocation fund should have. Last but not the least, it also the taxation treatment of different multi-asset funds differ from each other. So, for example, if it is equity-oriented fund, wherein you always have to keep 65% or above in equity as an asset, so that the end investor benefit from the equity related taxation which is lesser versus say fixed income taxation, or it could be the fund where the erstwhile debt taxation which is applied wherein there is wide distribution among different asset classes, but equity as an asset class will always remain minimum 35% in the overall asset mix. And in that context, the erstwhile debt taxation which is 20% LTCG with indexation benefit, for long-term investor which come for 3 year or above, that is potentially available. So these are two, three different, variation which are available in the market.
Now, when you say multi-asset fund, can any asset go into the construct of a multi-asset fund? My question is, can you include cryptocurrencies into this multi-asset fund? Is there a boundary line? I can take this, I cannot take this?
At the end of the day, we are looking for diversification and we are looking for smoother journey towards investor attaining their financial goals. Now, for example, in crypto's case, it is highly volatile and it does not have history to really determine the true long-term characteristics or the value that asset class can provide over and above the stable or established asset classes like commodities like gold, equities, international equity, or fixed income. So, in my view, crypto in that sense does not qualify A because of lack of history, and B, its diversification benefit is not yet established. But obviously, other asset classes definitely have a chance to be a part of the overall asset mix. So I explained equity, not only Indian equity, but international equity, which many a times would behave different from Indian equity because the profit pool which are available in India could be very different from the profit pool which are available in other markets like developed markets. So when you combine two different kind of equities, you are again providing diversification and exposing investor to different kind of risk reward. Similarly, in fixed income, definitely it provides a great anchor. And in commodity, you have a lot of options. So gold definitely is one of the proven hedge for the overall portfolio. It has great uncorrelated characteristics with both equity and debt. So it is a great, element in overall asset allocation mix. But some other commodities like copper, silver, and some of the relatively more volatile commodities like crude oil, etc., may have small allocation in overall asset mix. The whole idea is you combine in such a manner where it is logical it's persistent over different time cycles. And it is not only relevant today, but it is pervasive over a very long time period. So, and in different kind of markets and market situations. So, in that sense, there can be many asset classes, but definitely something which is not established and something which is new like crypto may not find a place in my view in a rightful asset allocation at this point of time.
As I understood, the multi-asset fund in a broad contours will come in two categories. One, something like a multi-cap fund, where how much of each asset is held is predetermined and it will not vary beyond that point. This is one category. The other could be something like a flexi-cap fund, where you have defined the boundaries, upper limit and the lower limits, and you have given enough room for the fund managers to play depending on how the cyclicity of individual asset works. But this makes things complex for an investor. How should an investor pick up the right multi-asset fund? What are the things he needs to know? Or is there a role for an advisor to guide them which multi asset fund they have to incorporate in their portfolio?
The most important thing is the comfort and how evolved is the investor. So if investor is really evolved, he understand or she understand the complexity which goes into model-driven dynamic asset allocation multi-asset funds, then they can perhaps look to go for those options because there always remain a potential that a very well established model can add slight better alpha or can reduce risk. But that's not a given. Models in India, which or whatever funds we have, obviously come up with some opaqueness. So you don't exactly know what's really going behind those models. And sometimes what is shown as backtest can differ from actual performance in real life. So it's not necessarily everyone's cup of tea. So for that, in that case, relatively more stable asset allocation, the defined asset allocation propositions, they sometimes attract a larger audience because, as I said, most important thing is it should be well diversified into 3 or 4 different asset classes. It should not be just for the namesake or for the label sake multi-asset, but you are only investing in one asset class, and just for the namesake, very small part you are keeping in other asset classes, which generally would do well in one part of the cycle, mostly an up cycle if you are more equity oriented fund. But over a cycle, the journey could be more painful in that kind of offering. So for an investor, they should look whether it is truly diversified into different asset classes, whether it gels with their own belief, and if they're looking for simplicity, in my view, more well-defined asset allocation in terms of which asset class would have how much of broad proportion in the overall asset mix, that should kind of attract large majority of investors as well as advisors, because at the end of the day, it is the advisor who's passing this knowledge and making the end investor comfortable about this whole proposition. So it should not be too complex and should not be kind of black box where even the middleman fails to understand what's going on.
Asset allocation is a key thing whenever we design portfolios. People say, what has been your experience? How much of returns you get? How much of the drawdown you prevent? Everything depends on asset allocation. My question is, are multi-asset funds by nature are evergreen or these are seasonal funds?
So, asset allocation is needed for everyone. Many a time people don't realize it, particularly when I would say there is a massive bull market, then people don't think it is necessary. But to my mind, everyone requires it, particularly those investors which are new to the market, which have not seen a cycle or two. They may not know how difficult it becomes when equities, for example, asset class, don't perform or rather actually provides negative return for a substantial period. So in that case, for the longevity of investors to remain in the capital market, diversification is must. And therefore, to my mind, this is evergreen. It should always be a part of every investor's core portfolio. The degree of exposure in asset allocation funds versus a pure equity fund could differ between the evolution of the end investors. Investors is less risk averse and more evolved, can have slightly higher portion of risky assets like equities versus other one which someone who's more risk averse and perhaps relatively new can have slightly higher proportion invested in multi-asset fund. But these funds have to be a part of core for every investor because that will give the longevity in overall journey towards attaining the financial goals.
Thank you very much for those words of wisdom where you said a multi asset fund should become a part of the core portfolio. One doubt that I have in my mind is see, the public's behavior is unpredictable. People, join the bandwagon when they see something, there is a momentum, and they will dish things if there is out of momentum. Our multi asset fund are also prone for underperformance. What is that the investors or the advisors have to keep in mind before they incorporate these multi asset funds into the core portfolios?
In fact, the beauty of multi-asset fund is that at any point of time, it would be underperforming one or the other asset class which is there in the fund because you are not 100% exposed to all the asset classes. For example, if fixed income is outperforming equity, you are not fully into fixed income. There's some portion in the invest in equity also, some could be in commodities. So because the leadership between asset classes keep changing and you are not fully invested in that asset class at the right time, all the time, that means you would be underperforming. But the beauty of these kind of funds is that the sum of the part is greater than the whole. That is, the more important part is that each of these asset classes have great long-term potential like gold, international equity, domestic equity, even fixed income. But the journeys are different of all of these. So when you combine, mix and match in a more disciplined manner, more scientific manner, you end up achieving similar returns, which best of these asset class are giving, with much lesser drawdown. And I think therefore the overall stress that the stress of underperformance and left out feeling that people have that get reduced materially. But yes, so for example, in a period like this, when equities are doing so well, any asset allocation fund or fund which is into diversification beyond equities would underperform a pure equity fund. So, but as I said, some of the part is greater than whole is what's the motto that investors need to understand when they think about asset allocation or multi-asset funds.
Every investor who participates in the market journey is not a long term investor. A lot of people come when the weather is favorable, they enter and they invest money wherever they feel that the money can be made. As a fund manager, what is the suggestion you have for such individuals? Where what is the minimum time horizon they should look at before they commit their money into a multi asset fund?
Multi-asset fund is strictly for the long term because if you come at a time when, say, for example, equity markets are doing very well, and that there's a couple of years when markets do well, you may feel that your portfolio of multi-asset fund is underperforming the market. And that's definitely not the reason why you come to the multi-asset fund. Multi-asset fund, you come, as I said, to eventually achieve your longer term goals. And when I say longer term, I mean 5 years or sometimes even beyond, because the financial goals that people have cannot be for a few months and few quarters. So this is where the true value of better risk adjusted return, higher return per unit of stress taken can be appreciated. So time is very much needed. An investor should only allocate more and more when they have a longer term time horizon, because by no ways one can establish a case for multi-asset funds for shorter term time frames.
If an investor has decided to invest in multi asset fund, what is the caution that he has to take? Let's say one is you mentioned about the time horizon. Is there an exposure control he has to exercise? Should he consult an advisor? As a fund manager, what is that the points that you would caution the investor? Attend to these and then invest in multi asset.
Important thing to my mind is to remember that this is not something which is like an elixir where your portfolio cannot deliver flat to even negative return from time to time. The whole idea is that they will do better, particularly when markets are bad. And on the overall life cycle of the market, of the capital market, 1 or 2 cycles, they would give similar returns like, say, large cap equities, for example. But they will also have their own journey where there will be reduced volatility, but there will be some volatility. So it's not without volatility. No asset class can have these periods of underperformance or drawdown. So that expectation setting has to be very clear. And secondly, as I said, if someone has a shorter term time frame and can get swayed by the recent fads, they should keep that part of the overall wealth or portfolio separately, and don't mix it up with your choice of the core part of your portfolio, that is funds like multi-asset funds. So for the shorter term tactical allocation, you can look beyond multi-asset funds and have the right expectation, so that you are not disappointed in a shorter term time frame when time to time these funds either does not deliver great positive return themselves because the underlyings are themselves underperforming, or they underperform the market, like equities, in a roaring bull market situation.
At this point of time, how big is the multi-asset fund category in the overall AUM of mutual fund as an industry? Any statistics available on this?
To the best of my knowledge, this is the fastest growing category and perhaps has crossed 1 lakh crore in AUM. But I'm not too sure of the number. But the reality is, this is the fastest growing category. More and more investors of all kinds, are looking forward to it. Particularly when markets have run up, valuations are high. The new set of investors, even the evolved investors, are looking for alternative which can, reduce their portfolio volatility and drawdown. If for valuation or other reasons, market underperforms or come into some kind of correction mode. So I think the awareness about these funds and what proposition different fund houses are communicating, I think that's also one of the reasons why the popularity of multi-asset funds is on the rise.
If multi-asset funds are going through an evolutionary ladder on the upside and it has drawn the attention of public at this point of time, I'm sure your fund house also must be working on this. What products you have launched in the multi-asset fund category? How are they doing? Can you give me some statistics around that?
So we have 3 to 4 different offering in overall asset allocation space, right from a model-driven fund, which is which has more than 5 year of vintage in the form of Balance Advantage fund, to a fund which is more diversified in terms of asset classes, sub-asset classes like asset allocator FOF. Last but not the least, a very, very important category for us is Nippon India Multi-Asset Fund, which is relatively less complex, really true to the label fund, which endeavor to provide better risk-adjusted return by actually investing in 4 different asset classes to really provide the diversification solution that the partners or investors are looking for. So we have the entire bouquet as far as asset allocation funds are concerned.
Mr. Ashutosh, can you tell me how the Nippon's multi-asset fund is different from the other funds, or can you give more information about the Nippon multi-asset fund?
Yeah, so this is slightly more than 3 year old fund where there is no over dynamism in this particular fund. The asset allocation is very simple. We know for the fact that domestic equity is done better. Equities as an asset class is relatively more superior over the longer period versus, say, commodities or fixed income. So we keep 50% in domestic equity, which is well distributed between large cap and mid caps. Another 20% of the overall asset allocation goes into international equities. Our belief is that the profit pool that many large global companies have, that superior or differentiated profit pool, Indian investors investing out of India may not enjoy by investing in Indian indices. So we provide this exposure by investing in MSCI World ETF. So 20% of our portfolio is invested in this ETF, which ultimately invest in best of the best companies in 23 countries. Between the remaining 30%, 15% is invested all the time in commodities, out of which 10% is always in gold or related instruments. 5% could be in gold, or it could be in other commodities where, from a tactical perspective, we are more positive, like silver, crude oil, nickel, etc. And last but not the least is fixed income, where 15% of the overall asset allocation goes into it to provide this much needed anchor that you actually look for in stable multi-asset offering. And there we ensure that we don't take undue credit risk or duration risk. So typically we keep duration well within 3 years and keep the overall quality of the portfolio at a very, very superior level. So 50, 20, 15, 15 is the motto. It's easy to understand, easy to communicate, and for us also it's very easy to manage. So I think in that ways, try to provide best of the organizational alpha and the right kind of diversification that any long-term investor is looking for.
Thank you very much for this input. And dear viewers, you have asked me through several comments that how can I invest in international equity sitting in India? Probably Nippon multi-asset fund could be one another option that you have, where you take an exposure to the international market by investing through the Nippon multi-asset fund.
There also you will end up getting the taxation which is attractive because it also attracts erstwhile debt taxation. So even in portions like commodities, fixed income, international equity, you will be only be exposed to erstwhile debt taxation of 20% LTCG with indexation benefits. So on a post-tax basis, that 50% exposure also becomes more attractive in that sense.
By the way, I would like to also add a disclaimer here that you do your due diligence, you consult your financial planner, consult your advisors, check through your risk profile, make sure you have attended to everything. Do not consider this as an advice that we have tendered to you to go overboard on multi asset fund. And if you take the necessary controls, exposure control, and take the professional assistance, I don't see a reason why multi asset fund should work in your favor. Thank you, Mr. Ashutosh Bhargava, for all these points, which has gone a long way in educating the general public about everything that they need to know about the multi-asset fund, why it's an absolute case for everyone to carry it in their core portfolios, what are the things that they have to keep it in mind, what's happening on the evolution ladder. I'm very sure my audience will be enriched with the inputs you have given to us. Thank you very much for your kindness to spare your time. I know how difficult it is to get an appointment with you. You are an active fund manager, but we remain in gratitude to you, along with my audience, for your kindness to spare your time and share your knowledge. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much for watching this episode on NRI Money Clinic. I'm very sure the points that we have discussed with Ashutosh Bhargava helped you to understand all the finer points that you wanted to know about the multi-asset fund. If it did give you a direction how you should proceed to the multi-asset fund, please do not forget to give me a thumbs up. If you are a person who is watching my channel for the first time, please hit the subscribe button and press that bell icon. Do not forget to share these videos with your friends and relatives, near and dear ones, and on all the WhatsApp groups on which you are connected with. Thank you very much for watching this episode on NRI Money Clinic. I shall be back with you with yet another expert next Tuesday. Till then, stay safe. Jai Hind, Jai Bharat.
Press the bell icon for more details and subscribe our channel.